Welcome back to Start Your Day. In a landmark case, two Atlanta area high school basketball coaches are facing murder charges after a 16-year-old girl died as a result of training in the heat. Imani Bell was taking part in conditioning drills, including climbing stairs at an outdoor facility in 2019. Now, the heat index was reportedly as high as 103 degrees, and so she died of heat stroke. A family attorney spoke about the case.
The athletic director knew these children were outside exercising in the heat and allowed it to happen. The coach put these children outside, and the coach was outside with them, so she knew how hot it was, and she allowed it to happen. There are several Georgia High School Sports Association rules that were not followed, and these children were allowed to be outside, and basically Imani was tortured to death for basketball.
This is so sad to hear. You know, Justice correspondent Candace Kelley joins us back with a little bit more on this case. So, Candace, walk us through these charges that the teachers are facing exactly.
So the indictment specifically said that these two coaches were responsible for the death of Imani Bell. What they said was that it was the excessive physicality of what they were required to do, as well as the excessive heat. Those combined caused dangerous conditions. Now, it's not only this particular murder charge, but we're looking at cruelty to children, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless conduct. Now, also named in this lawsuit was the principal, as well as two assistant principals and the athletic director, as we heard in the soundbite from the attorney there. So everything is on the table. But specifically, when we look at this case, we've heard of people dying of heat stroke before, but especially when it comes to football. But when it comes to a student and someone who is in a different sport besides football, and actually having an indictment where two people could be held responsible when it comes to second-degree murder, this is really something that is, in fact, unprecedented.
Well, it will definitely make other teachers think twice about putting students through these rigorous trainings, especially when it's hot. But legally speaking, how is the DA in Clayton County, Georgia, actually able to charge these two coaches with this death of this student?
So we heard from the attorney that there are certain state and school policies that these particular coaches didn't follow. I mean, if you have a coach that's standing outside, certainly he or she is going to be hot, and they should recognize that maybe the students are going to be hot. There are also school policies, especially when we know about people who have died before of heat stroke, where, you know, you have practices that will happen outside of these temperatures, maybe an evening practice or an early morning practice. And so when it comes to these coaches, they're saying, but for their negligence in this case, this just wouldn't have happened. And also that they saw that this student, Imani Bell, when she was climbing the stairs during this conditioning practice, that they saw that she was having problems, that she was distressed. They saw that and they didn't do anything about it, which is how these charges of second-degree murder are coming into place.
And what about the autopsy report? What do we know from the autopsy report about how she actually died?
Yeah, so when we think about the responsibility, we often will go to the autopsy. Was there something wrong with the student before? Was there maybe some heart condition, or did they have diabetes or some health condition that lent itself to the outcome of the situation? Here, the autopsy said that it was solely the heat that caused this heat stroke, and that this heat stroke combined with the physicality of what was going on is what caused her death, that she had no other underlying medical conditions, and there was nothing else to look at. So that, of course, lent itself again to this indictment against these two coaches.
Yeah, but a lot of people would also argue that the coaches had no idea. They couldn't have known that she was going to die, maybe that she was going to get tired or hot, but not that it was intentional.
Yeah, you know, and they're not saying that it is intentional. They're saying that it was the negligence of these coaches that caused her death. But when we look at this, we have to strike a balance. On the one hand, you have players that are out there who will do anything to get the win, to get the gold, to get the scholarship. But you have to balance that with the coach saying that we know that you want this win, but we are taking care of you. It's our fiduciary responsibility. You are in our care, and we want to make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. And because of that, we need to stop this practice, or we need to check the heat index. We need to have a concentration on what's going on. How much equipment are you wearing? What is it that you might have to bring to the table in terms of a medical condition? So yes, often we might say, we never knew this was going to happen. But as the attorney said, there were state policies, there were school policies that were not followed in terms of making these young athletes exercise in this heat. And what they were doing is they were going upstairs, right? Those big bleachers that we know of at our high schools, they were doing those drills and going upstairs. Very difficult even without the heat. Certainly with the heat, you would think that some common sense would come into play.
Yeah, that's so true. But as other coaches across the country hear about this story, what do you think the message is to them?
I think this really puts them on notice that for the first time, if you are a coach, right, if you are an athletic director and you're not keeping watch on what's going on, you could be indicted on murder charges. These are second-degree murder charges without the intent. So that really should put people on notice that first of all, let's go back to Corey Stringer, right? In the early 2000s, he died. They now have a Corey Stringer Institute that deals with these specific institutes. It's about these situations. He died because of a heat stroke. And what doctors said there and what they say today is that all of this is preventable if you just keep a watch on what's going on with your students. If it's 107 degrees, if it feels like 103 degrees, use common sense. You know, there are some teams that have people specifically just on heat and temperature duty. They're checking temperature, they're checking indexes, they're managing equipment to make sure that students do not fall prey to a heat stroke. So this puts the coaches across the country, athletic directors, on notice that they might need to do more. Keep an eye out and follow the rules that you might have on the book. And if you don't, get some rules in place.
And what about for the parents? Is there anything parents could have done or could do in the future to make sure something like this doesn't happen? Because a lot of times they're not at the practices, they're not with the school students.
Yeah, so when we look at the students, there also has to be this consideration that if you know that you're not feeling well, or if you feel that something is different about your body, that no one should come down on you for saying, hey, I need to take a break. I need to stop. I need to sit. There's this mentality often in college sports or high school sports, any level, keep going, keep going. And often these are the stories that make up a great athlete. You know, I worked out in spite of, I got up at 3 a.m. every day. But if we talk to our young people, if parents talk to their children and say, listen, you are also responsible for your body too. Don't let the coach pressure you just for a win, because your death is not worth it. So there's a little responsibility too on the young people, but it's hard because they don't want to be, I guess, seeded if they, feel like they have a bad practice. They want to be starters. They don't want to be, second fiddle to someone else. But I think that a conversation with students to know that they can speak up for their own rights is a good beginning.
All right, Candace Kelley, thank you for that update, and please keep us posted as this case develops. And now let's go to